The forest swallowed Alexander's screams as his phone shattered against a jagged rock, its screen splintering like his heart under the weight of his family's betrayal. At 17, he'd been dragged to this remote Oregon wilderness, his father's rage-fueled tirade about his sinful love for another boy still echoing in his ears. Left with nothing but the clothes on his back, Alexander faced the cold, the hunger, and the crushing realization that the people meant to love him most had abandoned him for being gay. The night was merciless. Pine needles crunched under Alexander's sneakers as he stumbled through the dense forest, his breath visible in the frigid air. His father's final words, "You're no son of mine," cut deeper than the thorns tearing at his jeans. Hours earlier, he'd been at home in Portland, sneaking glances at his phone, texting Lucas, the boy who made his heart race. A careless screenshot left on the family computer had exposed their secret, and by dusk, Alexander was here, alone, his lifeline to the world smashed to pieces. He sank against a tree, shivering, his lean frame barely shielded by a thin hoodie. At 17, Alexander was a vision of quiet beauty, dark hair falling into his emerald eyes, a face that could have graced magazine covers. But tonight, that beauty felt like a curse, a beacon for his family's disgust. His mother hadn't spoken during the drive, her silence a louder condemnation than his father's shouts. His younger sister, Lily, only 12, had watched wide-eyed from the back seat, too young to understand but old enough to sense the fracture. Alexander's stomach growled, and fear gnawed harder. He didn't know these woods. He didn't know how to survive. But giving up wasn't an option, not when he'd spent years hiding who he was, only to have his truth weaponized against him. He pushed forward, guided by faint moonlight, searching for a road, a stream, anything to anchor him. Hours blurred into a haze of exhaustion. But by dawn, he stumbled onto a dirt path. A passing hiker, a kind-eyed woman named Mara, found him half-conscious, dehydrated, and trembling. She gave him water, a granola bar, and a ride to a nearby shelter. The shelter in Eugene became his refuge. Run by a queer-friendly organization, it was a cramped, underfunded haven, but it was safe. There, Alexander met Ethan, an 18-year-old volunteer with golden hair and a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. Ethan's easy confidence and gentle humor drew Alexander in, though trust came slowly. Over weeks, they bonded over late-night talks, sharing dreams, Alexander's of becoming a writer, Ethan's of opening a community center for kids like them. Their connection was a spark, fragile but undeniable, kindled in stolen glances and brushed fingertips. Yet, the scars of abandonment lingered. Alexander flinched at sudden noises, expecting his father's shadow. He wrote letters to Lily he never sent, aching for the sister he'd left behind. The shelter staff helped him enroll in community college, where he poured his pain into poetry, his words raw and vivid. Ethan read every line, his hazel eyes bright with pride. By 19, Alexander had a part-time job at a bookstore, a tiny apartment, and Ethan by his side. Their first kiss, under a street lamp during a rainstorm, felt like reclaiming a piece of himself the forest had stolen. But the past wasn't done with him. A letter arrived, forwarded from the shelter. Lily's handwriting, shaky and urgent. Dad's sick. Mom's struggling. We need you. Alexander's heart lurched. The family that had left him to die now needed the man they'd discarded. Alexander stared at the letter, its edges crumpling in his trembling hands. Ethan sat across from him in their cramped Portland apartment, his steady presence a counterpoint to the storm in Alexander's chest. "You don't owe them anything," Ethan said softly, but Alexander's mind was already racing back to the forest, to the boy he'd been, terrified, rejected, but still hoping for love that never came. He was 22 now, his beauty sharper with maturity, his dark hair longer, framing a face that held both strength and sorrow. He'd built a life, studying creative writing, working at the bookstore, and loving Ethan fiercely. Yet, Lily's words tugged at him. She was 16 now, no longer the wide-eyed girl in the back seat. The letter mentioned their father's cancer, their mother's exhaustion, and a family on the brink. Alexander felt no loyalty to his parents, but Lily was different. She was his blood, his only tie to a past he couldn't fully bury. Against Ethan's protests, Alexander drove to his childhood home in Salem. The house looked smaller, its paint peeling like the facade of his family's morality. Lily answered the door, her face a mix of relief and guilt. She was taller, her brown eyes mirroring his own. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered, hugging him tightly. His mother, Ellen, stood in the hallway, her face gaunt, her silence heavy. His father, Richard, was upstairs, weakened by chemotherapy, a shadow of the man who'd driven him to the forest. The reunion was tense. Ellen's apologies were stilted, laced with excuses about protecting the family. Richard barely spoke, his eyes avoiding Alexander's. Lily filled the silence, explaining their financial ruin, medical bills, a foreclosed mortgage. They needed Alexander's help, not just emotionally, but financially. He was stunned. The audacity of their request, after years of silence, burned in his chest. Yet, seeing Lily's desperation, he couldn't walk away. Alexander returned to Portland, torn. Ethan urged him to protect his peace, but Alexander felt a duty he couldn't shake. He started sending money from his meager savings, dipping into funds meant for his and Ethan's future. Ethan noticed the strain, Alexander's late nights writing, his skipped meals to save cash. Their once easy love grew tense, arguments flaring over Alexander's loyalty to a family that didn't deserve it. "They left you to die," Ethan said one night, voice breaking. "Why are you saving them?" Alexander had no answer, only a gnawing need to prove he was more than the boy they'd abandoned. He took on freelance writing gigs, his stories gaining traction in local literary circles. His words, raw with pain and resilience, caught the eye of a publisher. But the pressure mounted, and cracks formed in his relationship with Ethan. The weight of his choices pressed harder. Alexander's days blurred into a cycle of work, writing, and worry. He sent money to Salem weekly, each check a silent scream against his past. Ethan's frustration grew. He felt like a bystander in Alexander's life, watching him pour himself into a family that had cast him out. One night, after a heated argument, Ethan packed a bag. "I love you, Alex, but I can't keep watching you destroy yourself for them," he said, his voice thick with tears. The door closed, and Alexander was alone again, the echo of abandonment louder than ever. He threw himself into his writing, channeling his grief into a novel. It was a fictionalized account of his life, a gay teenager left in the wilderness, clawing his way to survival and love. The manuscript poured out of him, each word a catharsis. By 23, he submitted it to a publisher who called it hauntingly beautiful, but success felt hollow without Ethan. Alexander tracked him down at the community center where Ethan now worked, helping queer youth. Their reunion was tentative, raw. "I'm trying to let go," Alexander admitted, tears falling. "But I need you." Ethan's resolve softened, and they rebuilt. Slowly, their love tempered by scars. In Salem, Richard's condition worsened. Alexander visited. His presence met with uneasy gratitude. Ellen confessed her regret, her voice breaking as she described the shame that had driven her silence. Richard, too weak to argue, mumbled an apology. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Lily, caught between them, begged Alexander to stay. He couldn't, not fully, but he promised to keep helping. The novel's publication changed everything. Titled Left in the Forest, it became a quiet sensation, its raw honesty resonating with readers. Alexander's story reached queer kids across America, offering hope to those facing rejection. He used the advance to pay off his family's debts, not out of forgiveness, but for Lily's future. Ethan stood by him, their bond stronger for its fractures. At 24, Alexander stood at a crossroads. His novel's success brought speaking engagements, interviews, and a platform to advocate for queer youth. He and Ethan moved into a larger apartment, their love a quiet anchor. But his family's pull remained. Richard's cancer went into remission, and Ellen pushed for reconciliation, inviting Alexander to family dinners. He went, warily, for Lily's sake. Each visit was a tightrope walk, his parents' newfound kindness clashing with memories of the forest. Lily, now in college, thrived under Alexander's support. She studied social work, inspired by his resilience. During one visit, she pulled him aside. "I'm sorry I didn't stop them," she said, tears streaming. "I was just a kid." Alexander hugged her, forgiving the girl she'd been. His parents were harder. Their apologies felt like bandages on a wound too deep to heal. He set boundaries, limiting contact to protect his peace. Ethan proposed one evening, under the same street lamp where they'd first kissed. Alexander said yes, his heart full. The engagement was a promise, not just to Ethan, but to himself, to live unapologetically. They planned a small wedding, inviting only those who'd stood by them. Alexander's family wasn't invited, a choice that felt like freedom. His novel continued to ripple. Schools used it in curriculums, and queer organizations invited him to speak. Alexander's voice became a beacon, his story proof that survival was possible. He and Ethan opened a small foundation, funding shelters like the one that had saved him. The work was grueling but fulfilling, a testament to their shared dream. By 26, Alexander was a name in literary and activist circles. His second book, a collection of essays on queer resilience, was in progress. He and Ethan married in a forest clearing, the same one where they'd shared quiet moments years before. The irony wasn't lost on Alexander. The forest, once his prison, now held his joy. Friend from the shelter attended, their cheers drowning out the ghosts of his past. His relationship with his family remained strained but civil. Richard, healthier now, tried to reconnect, but Alexander kept his distance. Ellen sent letters, which he read but rarely answered. Lily was the exception, their bond unbreakable. She interned at Alexander's foundation, her passion mirroring his own. The foundation grew, opening a second shelter in Seattle. Alexander and Ethan poured their hearts into it, mentoring kids who reminded them of their younger selves. One boy, Caleb, arrived at 16, kicked out for being gay. Alexander saw his own fear in Caleb's eyes and vowed to be the family he'd never had. Caleb's slow smile, after weeks of trust building, was a victory sweeter than any book deal. Alexander's writing evolved, weaving hope into pain. His essays sparked conversations, challenging families to confront their biases. He spoke at a national conference, his voice steady as he recounted the forest, the phone, the betrayal. The audience stood, tears in their eyes, and Alexander felt the weight of his purpose. At 28, Alexander stood on a stage in New York, accepting an award for his advocacy. Ethan was in the front row, his hazel eyes shining. The award was for Left in the Forest, now a touchstone for queer youth. Alexander's speech was simple: love is not a sin. Abandonment is. Choose love, the crowd roared. But his gaze was on Ethan, his anchor, his home. Back in Portland, their foundation thrived. Caleb, now 18, was studying art, his sketches vibrant with hope. Lily graduated, dedicating her career to child welfare. Alexander's parents faded into the background, their role in his life minimal but no longer painful. He'd forgiven them, not for their sake, but for his own peace. One evening, Alexander and Ethan walked through the forest where their love had deepened. The clearing was unchanged, wildflowers blooming under starlight. They sat, hands entwined, and Alexander realized he'd reclaimed the forest. It was no longer a place of loss, but of triumph. His story, once a wound, had become a bridge. Queer kids wrote to him, saying his book had saved them. Parents reached out, seeking guidance to mend broken bonds. Alexander and Ethan expanded their foundation, dreaming of a world where no one was left behind. The forest had taken everything from him at 17, his phone, his family, his safety. But it had given him something greater, the strength to rebuild, to love, to matter. Alexander wasn't just the boy left in the forest. He was the man who'd walked out, who'd chosen himself, and who'd shown others they could, too.